Driven by the Federal Reserve's aggressive interest rate hikes, banks have lost $515 billion worth of investment securities, according to the quarterly report from the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. While that figure is daunting, it is still less than previously has happened. To contextualize the setback, consider that the pre 2022 era of stability, where banks on average reported gains of $20 billion per quarter. Hi, y'all. Welcome to the GI Justin channel. I have tons to talk to you about today, especially this financial news that is staggeringly bad for our economic situation and our small and medium banks, which essentially are the lifeblood of the banking structure, which loan money to you and me for everything from buying a house to buying a car, and in cases like mine, owning a small business. So in this instance, we're talking about banks losing money at a higher rate than they have in a very, very long period of time. So this significant shift in losing money is associated basically with these interest rate hikes that the Fed is doing to decrease and combat inflation. So basically, inflation's going up, small businesses and banks are paying the price. Higher interest rates have caused the value of bonds set forth by the federal government to basically go way, way down, plummet to nearly zero when it comes to their value. And these losses are seen throughout the banking industry. No sector has been beat up worse in the stock market in the last quarter than banks, from small business banks, like the ones we've seen fail, to large banks like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. The losses have been noted throughout the entire industry, leading to the demise of First Republic, Signature Bank, and the Silicon Valley Bank, which means more failures already in 2023 than in any year since 2020 completely for the entire year. That's what we're looking at here, according to the data from the FDIC. So these unrealized losses are basically a decrease in value for items that are not yet sold, which means as long as the banks are holding on to them, they haven't actually lost the money for real. It's just paper loss. And unlike realized losses, which are actually losses that are legitimate dollar value failures and losses, these basically exist only on paper until they either hold these securities until they gain their value back, or go ahead and accept to sell them at the loss. They have a significant impact on the financial health of these institutions and are affecting the overall balance sheets and investment portfolios of these smaller and medium-sized banks. And the thing that is scary, the FDIC chairman, Martin Grunberg, basically has noted that despite these numbers, the banking sector is definitely not out of the woods yet. They continue to face significant downside risks from the effects of inflation, rising market interest rates, slower economic growth, and geopolitical concerns. The thing that is scary there is JP Morgan basically has come out and said, yeah, we're looking at massive losses. And granted, they are not yet realized, but how long can they hold on to these negative numbers before they have to do something? They need capital to operate. And if this capital is all locked up in failed and failing securities like bonds and treasury notes that are worth nearly nothing, then how far can they go before they have to get access to this money? For instance, take a small to medium-sized business that needs a couple $100,000 to continue operations. If the banks don't physically have the money in their investment portfolios to do these things, they don't have the money to loan. If they don't have the money to loan and these businesses use it as a bridge loan over the course of our decreasing economic situation, the turndown that we're currently facing, if they're using this money for operating capital to stay open, to stay in business, what happens when the banks don't have the money anymore to loan? Then what you'll start seeing is small and medium businesses failing at a higher rate than you already are. And I'm here to tell you, I know of several other small business owners who've shuttered the doors because they can't get access to capital to operate. And that's just a regular part of doing business, where if you want to make investments in your own business, a lot of times you have to go to a bank and get a loan to make these improvements. You don't have the operating capital on your own to purely do that. So what you end up having to do is borrow from the bank and pay it back. And theoretically, these improvements you make to the business should provide an increase in margin to the point that you're in good shape and can afford to do that. But if these banks have no money to loan, it's capping the ability of small and medium business to do such things. And that's why you're seeing so many of these failures. You know, it's the perfect storm, people not shopping, which turns into businesses needing to borrow money to stay afloat during this economic. They're saying we're not in a recession. Inflation is high. Banks don't have money to loan. People are saving their money. It's a recession. But during this time, people need money to stay afloat, pay their bills, and manage their businesses. And if the banks won't loan it, it's the perfect storm for small business. I think the thing we're going to see here is more banks fail before things get better. And most of them are going to be, like I said, the small and medium banks, because they're not immune to it either. So the large banks like Goldman Sachs, investment firms like Blackstone are going to continue to gobble up these small banks and gobble up the mortgages to your homes, the notes for your cars, your small business loans, and it will just make hedge funds like Blackrock and Vanguard and big banks more profitable because they are buying your debt for nearly nothing, because these banks are going out of business, so they have no choice but to sell for whatever they can get. I think that's what we're going to see is big banks and big hedge funds are going to get bigger, and small banks and small businesses are just going to fail. So moving on, topic number 2 for the day. There's a huge fight down here in Florida right now between Walt Disney, the company, because Walt's been gone for a minute now, and the state of Florida. And as a big part of that, both of them are kind of flexing on each other, seeing who's going to win out this fight. For a long time, Disney has had the ability to operate somewhat autonomously because it's good business for the state of Florida. It brings tourism. Tourism brings dollars. Dollars bring people. People are happy when they have money. And the tourism industry in the state of Florida needs Disney. So the question is, what's going on with Disney right now, aside from just this fight? An interesting thing is going on. So they have basically a hotel in Orlando that really was worth a ton of money, doing an amazing job, just killing it. And now basically it looks like Walt Disney World swung for the fences and has basically struck out. They had a $2,500 a night hotel called the Galactic Star Cruiser. And it turns out that now it is basically a $300 million write-off in a little over a year because people just aren't spending the money. So May 18th, Disney announced it's shutting down the Star Wars-themed Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel in Orlando at the end of September, 19 months after opening, because they're saying it's just a business decision, but a larger explanation came through, and basically the Disney park chairman says it just didn't perform the way they wanted it to perform, despite the fact it was a never-seen-before experience and raised the bar. It's time to sunset it, basically a year after they opened it. He told conference goers that Disney would accelerate depreciation on this Galactic Star Cruiser by up to $150 million in each of the last 2 quarters. So basically one of the largest experiments that Disney has ever tried, especially in one of the hottest industries that they have right now, which is Star Wars. You look at what Disney Plus is doing with Mandalorian, Boba Fett, all these other movies and all these other themed ideas. It's one of the hottest things going for Disney right now, but it ends up being a horrific disaster. And this thing launched with massive, massive fanfare. Took an estimated $400 million to build, and according to the CEO and founder of the Disney services, it looks like the project ran massively over budget, was delayed by COVID. And to give it kind of a context, they spent about $1 billion on the Star Wars section of the park, and of that billion, about $400 million was specifically on this hotel that they're now having to having to get rid of. And the thing that's kind of crazy about it, they didn't have your average hotel. It didn't just have like people behind the desk. It had actual people in full Star Wars regalia ready to rock and roll, and it's just an abject failure. Rooms are between $5,000 and $6,000, and people just can't afford that. So that's the problem that they're facing there. Is Disney just doesn't have, I don't think, the ability to withstand that. I mean, $5,000 a night. Who can afford that sort of thing? I don't see a way that they're ever going to be able to get people in those rooms. So yeah, it makes perfect sense that they are completely unable to get people to stay there. I mean, $5,000 a night. You're looking at what? Stay there 4 nights. You're looking at $20,000. Closing it makes good sense, I think, but it's a perfect example of what is going on in the world with uh, the recession. Like I was talking about, if a company like Disney can't afford to keep something open, what about small businesses who are trying to get a loan to expand or keep their company afloat during these challenging economic times? It's not happening. Disney can't make it work. Who can, right? Um, the last big thing I want to talk to you about kind of goes back to what we've been looking at in the foreign affairs universe, and it goes back to China. So there is breaking word right now that Chinese fighter aircraft have been very aggressive to a U.S. plane flying over the South China Seas about 10 hours ago. Pilot of a Chinese fighter jet carried out unnecessary aggressive maneuvers while approaching a U.S. plane in the South China Sea, American officials have reported. Basically, this fighter jet flew directly in front of this American aircraft, which, truth and honesty, this airplane is called an RC-135. It's basically an airliner that has been converted to perform reconnaissance. So yeah, there's a decent chance we were doing some keeping up with the Chinese and what they were doing, but we've got video of it, obviously, but it flew directly in front of our aircraft, causing our aircraft to have to alter its course, which is a big no-no when it comes to intercepting aircraft. You don't cut them off like that because you could cause a crash. And what happens when a Chinese aircraft kills 35 Americans? We are officially at war. That's great. And all because they're performing these dangerous intercepts. We basically have come out saying that the plane was conducting safe and routine operations in international airspace, which, hey, everyone has access to. No one can hold international airspace away from somebody else. That's why it's international. China hasn't yet come out and spoken as to why they are performing these dangerous interceptions, which they've been doing frequently lately. Um, our Pacific Command, PACOM, which is the Air Force command in charge of that region, says we expect all countries in the Indo-Pacific region to use international airspace safety and in accordance with international law. This really, more than anything, raises the tensions that we have with China even further, because now you're putting American aircraft, even again for the 20th interception of the year, in danger. They are not doing these things in good faith. We intercept aircraft all the time. We intercept a Russian aircraft probably once or twice a month at least. And when we do so, there are laws and a playbook for how you're supposed to execute these. And at no point are they ever done in a way that is less than professional, that causes problems for the aircraft being intercepted. That's the difference. And it goes back to, I'll link it up here in the top at the beginning of the playlist, or at the beginning of the episode, but it just goes even further to show, right after we talked, last week about a state-sponsored Chinese hacking group who basically has hacked American infrastructure, that the Chinese are already attempting warfare on us and already attempting to push us into combat with them. So the question kind of becomes, what are we going to do about this stuff? I think we have to do something, and I think that something needs to happen soon. So As always, thank you guys for watching the channel and hanging out with me for about 15 minutes so I can keep you up to date on what's going on in the universe. Thank you guys for watching the channel. I appreciate it. And thank you for subscribing to the channel. And hey, if you're getting good stuff from this, copy the URL and send the channel to somebody else, because I really like growing the channel and being able to bring more legit information without bias to the masses. So thank you guys so much for liking the videos and commenting, and have an awesome day.